Hello, and do your very best not to scream. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's M. Night Shyamalan month, and this week we are talking the 2004 film, The Village. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host we don't speak of, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
Chris, I told you not to talk about me. No,
You're like Voldemort.
Yeah. No, I am ready to talk about this one. I had not, I don't know that I'd seen this one all the way through. I had obviously heard about various things about it just over the years. I mean, this is almost 20 years old now. Ugh.
It is 20 years old now, Andrew. It's 2024. It's the new year.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, no. Anyway, I'd not seen this all the way through. I don't know that I ever had. I'm sure when it came out, 2004, I was probably still in high school. So, like, I probably, like, kind of heard word of mouth of, like, it's not that great. And then, like, never really went back to it, especially as his career kind of continued. But so I was excited, especially after I heard a slightly ringing endorsement from a friend of mine. So, not just a slightly ringing endorsement, a very heavy endorsement. So I don't know who, I can't say who, but so I was excited to get into this and check it out. And yeah, I actually, I don't know that I share quite their level of enthusiasm, but I think there's quite a lot to like here. So I'm excited to talk about it.
I really enjoy this movie. I like it a lot. Not just in the pantheon of M. Night movies, but in general, I've championed this thing since it came out. I did see it in theaters, probably opening weekend. I remember it was like a packed theater. Me and my dad saw it. And yeah, the reception was mixed at best, but mostly lamenting the twist ending, or a aspect of the twist ending of this film. We will get there. We will talk about it. But at this time, I was all on board with M. Night Shyamalan. And his career was probably peaking here, at least as far as his the perception in the general public, right? Starting with The Sixth Sense as this huge smash hit, follows it up with Unbreakable, which didn't make quite as big of a splash, but is sort of like the cult favorite of his filmography at this point. That movie has only garnered more critical attention. Follows up Unbreakable with Signs, which is, again, another huge, just absolute smash hit that seemingly everyone loved. And then we get The Village. And at this point, I mean, movies are being marketed as M. Night Shyamalan movies. He's reached that auteur level where, like, his name is the genre, much like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan. It's the new film by M. Night Shyamalan. And it doesn't strike people the same way, and his I don't know, the baggage that comes with his name is forever changed moving forward, and it's gone up and down since then. We'll talk about it as we go through the month, but that's where we were with M. Night in 2004. But I was a huge fan then. I'm not as big of a fan now because I don't love all of his movies, but I'm always still to this day interested anytime his name is attached to a movie. It's like, is this going to be one of these M. Night movies or one of those M. Night movies? And at the very least, it's always interesting. I will at least say that. And I think he's a very competent filmmaker and director. We will talk about it as we go through these movies, but that's where I stand with M. Night. Andrew, how about you? What is M. Night's name being attached to a movie? What does that mean to you?
Obviously, he had a pretty big. It was a pretty meteoric rise, and then almost just as quick, he like kind of vanished. And
I believe it was
kind of a punch.
Entertainment Weekly that on the cover did a cover story on him and said the next Spielberg after Signs, so after 3 movies,
which is pretty high praise. And
right.
And it's interesting to think about when he makes when he makes The Sixth Sense, that man is 28 years old. And then like even The Village, he's 34. He's younger than I am now when he makes The Village and when he's making all of these like peak films. To be fair, Tarantino, pretty young when he got in as well. Kevin Smith, guys like that, all the same. But it's interesting to look because there's definitely, because, Lady in the Water, Happening, Last Airbender, After Earth, like those all kind of like, just everyone was like, it became a punchline where like once M. Night was releasing, people were just like, how does M. Night get to keep making movies?
Yeah.
How does he keep getting to do this? Like, why does he do this? He's a punchline. Just a punchline. A gag. And then he's had a bit of a resurgence lately, where, it's kind of evened out a little bit more, and people are kind of more willing to give him a shot and kind of a fair hand. But the way I've viewed M. Night pretty much since for at least the last 4 or 5 years is, there's a lot of lamenting that there's nobody out there telling original stories anymore. It's all IP and blockbusters and franchises. And M. Night is a guy that, at bare minimum, is out there largely doing his own thing. I know he's done a few adaptations in his time. He's also gotten a couple of, there's been some plagiarism allegations. None of them have really led to anything. Sometimes people just come up with similar stories. It does happen. But I'm basically just really glad he's out there doing his thing, even if it's not all for me. In that era where everybody says nobody's out there telling original stories anymore, he's out there telling largely original stories. And there's something to be said about that. So I said, they don't always work for me, as I probably have made clear to many people at many times. But I'm glad he's out there making the movies that he is. And from all indications, he's going to stick with it. So that's kind of where I sit with him. Like, is he one of my favorite directors? No. When he comes out with something, I'm going to give it a shot. And even, like I said, even if it's not for me, I'm glad he's out there doing it.
Well, today it's all about The Village, the movie that was released July 30th of 2004, made on a budget of $60 million, and at the box office, it brings in $256.7 million. Sizable return. It is a hit, but as we've said, critically, the reception just is not as strong as its previous efforts. It holds a 44% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. The audience score is a little bit higher than that, but still not great. I think those numbers are pretty accurate from, for what I see, just kind of in the general public and the perception of this film. Now, 44% critic score, it's not great. It's not the worst, but some of the critics that didn't like it really didn't like it. I remember reading quite a few reviews of this movie. This was like in the peak of my MRQE.com era, where I was just reading as many reviews on movies and critical analysis as I could. One of them really stuck out to me because early on in their review, and look, we're going to get to these twist endings and everything, but very early on the review, they say the movie takes place in 1897, as we learned from a gravestone, and then they just move on with their review. And I'm like, well, they didn't lie, but it's interesting reading a line like that after seeing the movie. Roger Ebert, a critic that we've both gone on record to say we really enjoy their work. I mean, he's greatest of all time for a reason. Did not like this film, gave it 1 star. And here's an excerpt from his review. He says, The Village is a colossal miscalculation. A movie based on a premise that cannot support it. A premise so transparent it would be laughable were the movie not so deadly solemn. To call the ending an anticlimax would be an insult not only to climaxes, but to prefixes. It's a crummy secret about one step up the ladder of narrative originality from It Was All a Dream. It's so witless, in fact, that when we do discover the secret, we want to rewind the film so we don't know the secret anymore. That's about as harsh as you can get on this movie. While I do always enjoy Ebert's writing, insult prefixes. That's pretty funny. I vehemently disagree with just about everything from that excerpt, but I wanted to read that to kind of set the stage here in case people don't remember the reception of this movie. It wasn't hated by everyone, but the people that aren't hot on it are really not hot on it. They're really negative about it, and I think that's a great example of that.
Yeah, it's that Ebert review is about as scathing as it gets. Basically says straight up, not just is this movie bad, it's essentially an insult to cinema. Which feels harsh. Yeah, and it feels like this is kind of that movie. Like you either liked it or you really hated it. Like it kind of felt like there wasn't a whole lot of in between there. And watching it back now, especially like having seen how his career unfolded since, is kind of interesting. To kind of just see, the kind of, you can see the kind of some of the tropes that got associated with him. I could definitely see those kind of starting with this movie. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of stuff from his previous films that people like that do work in the movie. So it really does feel like we'll get to like you said, we'll get to the endings, but I really do think it's the endings the twists rather, that break this movie for people. And specifically, I think it's the second twist. But yeah, quite a range of emotions.
Taking a look at the creative team, well, as the opening credits tell us, the movie is written, produced, and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Tells you that up front. Like I said, the man is a genre unto himself by this point. We're going to talk about a lot of this guy's career. We talk about him all month long, obviously. He is our entire category for the month. But let's just take a look at the movies that led up to this point. First off, you have Wide Awake, technically his first Hollywood film, written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, but I would not say that is a, quote, M. Night Shyamalan film. It's basically him proving he can make a competent film so that he can then make the movies he truly wants to make. Disclaimer, I have not seen Wide Awake, but just what I know about the movie, it's not a typical M. Night movie.
No.
That, of course, starts with The Sixth Sense, a movie that was very popular and had a very well-known twist ending. I think it's probably the first movie that comes to most people's minds when they think of twist ending. Then Unbreakable comes out the very next year, again starring Bruce Willis. Like I said, doesn't quite hit those highs, but already I think there's an expectation for a huge twist ending, because personally, I don't consider Unbreakable to be a twist ending movie, but I think many people do. There is a reveal late in that movie. I don't know, Andrew, do you think of Unbreakable as a twist ending movie?
I think you could phrase it that way. I think obviously, I think there is a twist at the end of that film. The question is, does it? It's a twist, but all it really does is recontextualize what's happened. It doesn't really change anything that's happened. Like with something like Sixth Sense, that ending retroactively changes a lot of that movie. Not changes, but
you view it differently on your second viewing, knowing what you know. And I don't think Unbreakable, you really do that.
I would say maybe to a degree, simply because you know that. I mean, I'm just going to say it. That Glass is essentially guiding Bruce Willis through this. There is a recontextualization there of his actions based off of the ending of that film. And I would classify it as a twist. I don't know that it's to the level of Sixth Sense, because that's kind of the thing. They're all twists, but I don't know how you necessarily break it all up. But
that's what I remember people saying about Unbreakable. The twist isn't as good as The Sixth Sense. And that was their entire criticism. It's well, there's a whole movie there to judge, regardless of that one ending and if it's as big or not. So I feel like it was with the M. Night movie, it's can you guess the twist ending? And that was all we were focusing on. And I think that's why Unbreakable has had a good reevaluation over the years, because you kind of look at it outside of that shadow of The Sixth Sense, and there's something. There's some quality there. I mean, I really enjoy it. Then we have Signs, which is maybe his most people-pleasing movie. I mean, I know there's people that don't like the movie, but I feel like that really captured a wide array of moviegoers. And no twist ending, right? I mean, there's some, information and revelations at the end of that film, but I don't think there's a twist ending to Signs.
Yeah, I think that with Signs, it's more like you've got all these weird eccentricities throughout the film that kind of finally all come back around. But that's not really a twist. That's just storytelling. Right. So yeah, I would not say that I think Signs has a twist end. Like, obviously the reveal that there are actually aliens but it's not twist really. Like, you kind of expected that. And the trailers might have even outright said it. I don't remember. But yeah, I wouldn't say Signs.
I mean, we know there's aliens since like at least the birthday party home video, which is one of the coolest scenes in that movie. Joaquin Phoenix watching that in the closet. Yeah, I like Signs. That's a good one. But
I gotta rewatch that one. I haven't rewatched that one in a long. I don't know that I've rewatched much of any of his except Unbreakable. So I need to do that. I need to fix that.
Good month to do it, Andrew. And then we get The Village, and I still think, despite Unbreakable, maybe having a twist ending and Signs not having a twist ending, I still think there was that expectation that he's the twist ending guy. And
The Sixth Sense is just going to give you that. Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
Like, would you do something like The Sixth Sense where the twist is so, I think I joked about it on a previous episode that it's kind of wild that, we all watched that movie and we were just like, oh, Bruce Willis's wife hates him. And that was a completely acceptable realization for us for watching that movie back. Nobody had a problem with it. And then like the ending and you're just like, oh, what? I think, but the minute you do something like that, I think, yeah, you're going to be the twist ending guy. That could have been the only movie he ever made with a twist ending, and he'd probably still be known as the twist ending guy. The fact that he just kept doing it is definitely just added to it. But I think, yeah. So even by The Village, I'm assuming people are waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Well, that's what we're talking about today. The Village. There's plenty of other movies of filmography we'll talk throughout the month. But for now, it's time to talk some Village. Andrew, are you ready?
Yes.
In a small village surrounded by Covington woods, people live in fear of those we don't speak of, thought to be violent creatures that live in the surrounding forest. But when Lucius Hunt is stabbed, the difficult decision is made to send someone to a nearby town for medicine for the first time since anyone can remember. That person is Ivy Walker, the fiancée of Lucius and blind daughter of the village founder. Despite learning the truth about the myth of the creatures, she still finds something to fear on her journey. That's the gist of it. And this movie has such an interesting...
Classic American story.
interesting structure. Because she doesn't set off on this journey until like halfway through the movie. But then that becomes...
She's kind of not even really in the first third of this movie very much.
They take their time, introducing her. Like, you see, various kids run the
Judy
village
Greer
and stuff.
Before we see Bryce Dallas Howard, so...
Yeah. It is interesting. Before we hit record, we're talking about the cast of this movie a little bit, and you mentioned Sigourney Weaver, and you almost have this expectation for Sigourney to be the lead of a movie because it's Sigourney Weaver, and this movie is kind of like Alien in the sense that if you were to try to guess the lead of the movie in the first half, you probably wouldn't be able to do it. You probably would guess wrong, but it's very clear by the end of the movie who's the hero and whose movie it is, much like Sigourney Weaver in Alien, and I think that happens with Bryce Dallas Howard here. So not a lot of other similarities between the two movies, but in that way, sort of this ensemble cast evolving to be a female-led hero story. There's some comparisons to be made there.
There are indeed, and I'm going to allow it.
Thank you. Before we talk about the plot of this movie and get into it, and of course the twist, we're just going to talk about the cast as we always do, starting with the high point, the best casting, the best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, who's getting your Mark Strong Award for The Village?
There's a couple of people really bringing it here, but I think I got to go with Bryce Dallas Howard as Ivy Elizabeth Walker. I think she carries easily the entire second half of this movie, as well as large parts of the first half. And she's got a very interesting spot to sit in, because first off, this character is blind. So there is that aspect of the character that she has to portray. And then she's sent on this journey through the woods, and the companions she's been given abandon her, and so she's kind of got to play this whole danger and venturing into the unknown, while also juggling all the emotions she's having at the revelations that she's found out, and dealing with the trauma of what's happened back home as well. And she has to balance all of that, and I think she does a pretty great job doing that. And still manages to be this competent, strong character through all of it. So I think for me, there's really no question that it's Bryce Dallas Howard as our essential lead Ivy.
Man, I agree. Definitely the Mark Strong Award for me as well. And I think this cast is on fire. I think everyone's on top of their game. I mean, we're going to go up and down. Like I've got nothing but good things to say about just about everybody here, performance-wise. And I still got to say she's just bringing it. And whenever the movie's on her shoulders, she rises to the occasion, which is crazy impressive because this is essentially her first lead ever. And it's a high-profile blockbuster Hollywood movie. She's had bit parts here and there. Ron Howard has cast her like in cameo parts. I guess she's kind of an alum of the show. We talked about How the Grinch Stole Christmas. She's in there somewhere. We talked about Spider-Man 3. Of course, she's Gwen Stacy there. But and we've talked about all those Jurassic World movies. So we've talked about Bryce Dallas Howard a lot, I'm realizing. But this is the first time she's receiving a Mark Strong Award. And I'm not an expert on her filmography. I certainly haven't seen all of her movies, but this is her best performance that I've ever seen. It's really strong. I remember just being really taken. Oh, and Terminator Salvation. Have we talked about her more than anyone else? I think she might be have the most appearances on our show now I'm thinking about it.
Man.
I know Halle Berry's up there because like the X-Men movies and Catwoman, but I think by now it's got to be Bryce Dallas Howard. But finally getting that Mark Strong Award, and super well deserved. She does such a good job. You know, there's a comparison to be made between M. Night Shyamalan and Spielberg. He's obviously influenced by the guy, isn't shy about it. And a common trait is this close-ups on a character's face to get their reaction, and holding on to a character's face and really letting their performance carry the entire scene. And you get that a lot with Bryce Dallas Howard here. And somewhat ironically, like her eyes really convey a lot of emotion, because the character is blind, but she's still putting so much into like her facial expressions, and I just totally buy everything she's selling here. And I'm not trying to talk backwards or backhanded about our Mark Strong Award winner here, but I've seen a lot of other stuff she's in where she feels maybe miscast at times, or just not fitting in with the surrounding, just feels off. But here is just 100% dialed in, totally right for the role, absolutely killing it. I haven't rewatched this movie in a while. I had a feeling she'd been Mark Strong Award, and there's just no question watching this movie. Great performance, love it. Bryce Dallas Howard, Mark Strong Award winner.
Ditto.
Also in this movie is Joaquin Phoenix as Lucius Hunt. Um, early.
That's disrespectful, Chris. Um,
It's Joaquin Phoenix. Early in this man's career, relatively. I mean, he had been a child actor. He's been in the game for a long time, but maybe his most high profile before this movie was Gladiator. I know that got him a lot of attention. This is before Walk the Line, which is one of his first big
that's the year after
leading
this.
man roles. Yeah, that really launches him into like another stratosphere. But honestly, in the back of my head, I'm kind of like, hey, can we praise Joaquin Phoenix? Is there any controversy surrounding this guy? He's a bit of an oddball at times, but I think it's safe to praise him. Tremendous actor. Very interesting in the roles that he chooses. But I've never seen a Joaquin Phoenix movie where I felt like he was phoning it in. Her, I really like a lot. Joker, for all its issues, he's given a performance. I mean, he throws himself into everything. This is no exception. Again, carrying a lot of scenes just on his face and his expressions, and his character notably doesn't speak a whole lot. I mean, that's kind of foundational to his character, but he's still able to convey so much with his body language and facial features. And Joaquin Phoenix, what can you say about the guy? It's Joaquin. It's Keen.
It's Joaquin. It's Keen.
It's Nix.
It's Nix. First off, Chris, Gladiator was like a huge deal. Like, he got tons of attention for Gladiator.
That's what I said. I said that was his biggest thing. You
were like, it might have been his biggest thing. Got him a little bit of attention. No,
okay,
Gladiator got him a lot of attention. Like, Russell Crowe may be the lead of that movie, but the lead is only as good as the villain, and Joaquin makes a great villain. Yeah, it's interesting because like I feel like there's a controversy about Joaquin Phoenix, but like when you really read about it, you're just like, no, the dude just did some weird stuff for a little while there. Like, he was doing like the weird like late night show appearances where he was like, seemed like he was drunk, but it turned out it was like all in character, and it was all to promote this weird mockumentary he was doing.
That Casey Affleck movie. But I think there's some stories from the production of that movie that are
I'm still here.
Troubling.
That's it.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of great movies. Obviously, still out there. Just this year just last year, my mistake. Did Beau is Afraid and Napoleon. Got the Joker sequel coming out this year. He actually had a really good. There's like a neo-noir thriller called You Were Never Really Here. That I actually think is a better Joker movie than Joker is. But he's Joaquin Phoenix. And in this one, it's actually interesting because like he plays a really interesting character because like he's questioning things very much so. And he's kind of our conduit through how we see like when you question the order of the village, what happens, because he's kind of pushing and is like, we just had somebody in the village die. I can go out there. I can get medicine. I can find out what's going on. I can do this. And the village is like, the elders are like, no, you're not going to do that. So he goes out there against their urgings, and you see what they do. You like, especially with the framing, that finding out that it's all kind of orchestrated by the elders. You see what goes on and how they try to keep and subjugate everybody into staying within the bounds of their village. And he's the conduit for a lot of that. But I do really like the scene where the monsters show up and he's basically like Supermaning himself through the village, just making sure that everybody's okay and doing that whole process. And I just thought it was a really interesting character. And then I was shocked when he got taken out halfway through, basically, where I was just like, whoa. A great performance, though, in this movie. I think he does a great job sitting in that kind of weird spot, because Ivy is not really questioning the village itself necessarily. She's driven by love. She's driven by this desire to make Joaquin Phoenix's character Lucius better, and she's driven by that almost exclusively. And but he's the one that's a little bit more restless and kind of like something. The one who seems to be like, there's something not right here, and I kind of want to figure out what's going on. And you see that struggle So he's the conduit through the first half of this movie for that struggle. And it's really well done.
If we haven't mentioned already, this movie is stacked. I mean, it's one of those things like even in 2004 it was stacked, but a lot of these stars have risen even higher. So in retrospect, it's even more so. Adrian Brody plays Noah Percy, and he was a big deal already. This is after The Pianist, which gets him tons of critical acclaim, and rightfully so. It's a very powerful performance there. Interesting, I guess I can say this for a lot of actors here, like interesting that he takes such a supporting role so soon after that, but he does, and I really like Adrian Brody as an actor. Talk about miscast, like he's all over the place with the roles that he does and the genres, and I don't know where he's supposed to fit in. He always feels a little bit, and I'd say I'm thinking about Predators specifically, which I don't know how we didn't cover Predators when we did Alien vs. Predator month. We got to go back to that movie. A movie I do enjoy, but seeing him, if you go from like The Pianist and this to Predators, where he's like this muscled up action star that has some like a grizzled voice, it's so weird. He's good. Look, we'll talk about it when we talk about Predators, but
was that one poorly received? I didn't think that it was.
Is it not? Maybe that's why we didn't do it. Maybe in my mind it is, but maybe it's got good reviews.
I think it's fresh enough and made enough money. I mean, we could probably justify. It's our show, Chris. We can do whatever we want. But
that is true. We can.
Yeah, this is. I feel like though. I think part of the reason for this is I feel like after Sixth Sense, Unbreakable Signs, I feel like M. Night had to be somebody people wanted to work with.
I think that's true.
You know, there was probably a desire for people to be like, I gotta get in on this. So I mean, like I said, looking at the cast of this movie alone, a lot of people in deep supporting roles that you kind of wouldn't expect. But I think people were kind of like, I gotta get on the M. Night train, and got to get on the night train to Pennsylvania. I don't know. I lost that one.
Workshop it. We got all month. We'll figure it out. Staying in.
But either way, no, I think that's definitely a part of it, though. I think people were interested, and so with Adrian Brody, I mean, The Pianist, he got a lot of attention for that. He gets a little bit more coming after this. I actually really like Hollywoodland, a movie he's in about the murder of George Reeves. Where George Reeves is played by Ben Affleck, of all people. He ends up on the Wes Anderson circle at a certain point, shows up in Darjeeling Limited, sticks around, does Fantastic Mr. Fox, Grand Budapest Hotel, even just this last year's Asteroid City. He's definitely in that circle as well. He is in a Ryan Johnson film I'm quite the fan of, called The Brothers Bloom, with Rachel Weisz and Mark Ruffalo. It's also a really fun movie. Kind of a comedy caper heist type film. So he's all over the place. He really is. And I mean, he's a fantastic
remember
actor.
Splice?
Great job.
Or The Jacket?
I do remember Splice. Unfortunately. I try to move on from it as much as I can. But yeah, occasionally though, you're right though that he does like an action film, and it just feels so strange. He was actually in a movie, came out I think it was 2022, called See How They Run, and it was a murder mystery with like Sam Rockwell and Saoirse Ronan as the leads, and he plays this kind of. It's set in like the 1950s in England, and he's this American director being brought over to make an adaptation of this play, and he ends up being like our murder of the film. And but he recurs throughout. They keep finding ways to use him, and he just plays this deeply unlikable American director, but is still giving it his all and putting in a fantastic performance. And here he's got a particularly interesting role because the character, there's an issue of some kind. That they imply at one point that maybe there's a medication that can help him, but it feels a little bit more like a developmental disability of some kind. Obviously, we don't need to go too deep into
Yeah.
to that part of it, but he's given his all regardless.
Judy Greer, as you mentioned, she's in this movie. She plays Kitty Walker. This is Ivy's younger sister, and I don't know. I love Judy Greer. I love how she shows up. I wish she was in more things. She's one of those actors. I'm like, why aren't you in everything? It's always like pretty small parts of things I see her in. I'm like, I want you to do more. But yeah, she's great here. One of the biggest laughs in the movie is when she confesses her love to Joaquin Phoenix's character. Of course, he's a very quiet character. He doesn't say a word, and she's just going on and on about how much she loves him and wants to marry him, wants to shout it so everyone knows it. And then there's this shot of Joaquin Phoenix with this blank stare. Smash cut to her crying in bed.
Wailing.
Yeah.
Like wailing. Like, oh my God. She's just destroyed.
It's so good. And then she falls in love, and like 2 scenes later, she marries someone else. It's very good.
It's it's very good. There's a shirt a friend I used to work with at the Alamo Draft House, also named Andrew, co-founded this kind of pop culture shirt company called Super Yaki. And they had a shirt for a long time that said Judy Greer should have been the lead. And
because that applies to every movie she's in.
Basically, and generally speaking, I'm like, I can't really argue with this logic. She's fantastic in pretty much everything she's in. Obviously, I really like her in Halloween 18, even Halloween Kills. I think she does a great job in that. It just kind of shows that she can drift from genre to genre, kind of do whatever she needs to do. The twist in Halloween 18, where like she's like right at the end, where she's like at the top of the stairs and she's like, "Mom, I can't do it. I can't do it." And then Michael appears and she's like, "Boom, gotcha." I was like, "Oh." I was like, that was so good, so good. So Judy Greer's fantastic. This is earlier in her career, which explains a little bit more why she's not the lead, probably. She'd been in a bunch of stuff, kind of in bit parts, but this was definitely, I think, one of her first larger roles, and just makes the most of what she's got. The movie kind of makes me think she's going to be one of our lead characters at the beginning, but then again, she kind of fades out of the second half almost completely. But she makes the most of every single moment she's on screen.
I want to round out our younger cast before we get to the elders. We have Michael Pitt as Fenton Coyne, who for most of his scenes, his job is just to be terrified. We see him like on the lookout for the creatures. He sees the perimeter get breached and has to warn people. He also accompanies Ivy in her final journey at the end of the movie, but quickly chickens out and in the most cowardice way is like, "You're blind. They'll take pity on you. They'll kill me. I've got to go. You're a tomboy, or you're good at this, like a boy." And it's just so delightfully cowardly. And he just delivers it so well.
There's just the way he says it too. Of just like, it's one step from just like, "You're a blind woman. I'm a white man. Of course they're going to kill me." Like, just like.
And then Jesse Eisenberg plays a character named Jameson. Honestly, if it wasn't Jesse Eisenberg, we probably wouldn't be talking about it right now, because there's like 3 key scenes, I think. We see him playing the game where he stands with his back to the woods, and for as long as he can. He's obviously terrified at that point. He discovers, and he's like not even in focus in the scene, but he discovers when Joaquin Phoenix is stabbed and Bryce Dallas Howard is over him. He walks up, sees it, and goes and tells people. And then he announces whenever Ivy makes it back. Those are like his 3 speaking scenes. You see him, obviously, it's a small village. You see him in other scenes throughout. But it's Jesse Eisenberg. And like now that he's blown up, it's impossible to see him and not be like, "Hey, Leo Point. Like, what? Look at that guy. It's Jesse Eisenberg."
Like the first scene he's in. Again, my brain sees his name in the credits. I was like, he's got to be a sizable character. I just completely forgot that like this is really early on in his career. And there's not a lot going on there. And but yeah, it's got 3 scenes here, probably literally less than like 2 minutes of total screen time. At the end of the day, like the first scene is probably the one where you see him the most, but it is not a lot. And he starts he starts getting a little bit more side. Like the year after this, he does a movie called Cursed, which a great candidate for our show was a Wes Craven werewolf movie. But he's one of the leads in that movie, and so you can see like that leads to stuff like Adventureland, and then that leads to Zombieland, which is probably his big solo breakthrough moment where people kind of like, there he is. And then Social Network the year after that probably cements it. But this is super early on. And it's just funny to see him in such a tiny, tiny role.
Of course, alum of the show, we should say, as we talked about Batman v Superman, as well as Lex Luthor there. Let's talk about the elders in this village. At the center of it all, we have William Hurt playing Edward Walker. Quick little story here. William Hurt died recently, and I remember seeing a tweet by Lexi Alexander, who we talked about on the show, director of Punisher Warzone, and it was something to the effect of, I've been trying to tell you people to Google names before you wish someone rest in peace. So I Googled William Hurt, discovered some awful things about the guy, and I will remember that tweet forever. I'm choosing my words carefully. It is, I mean, we live in an era now, post Me Too, where we have seen a lot of high-profile people face consequences for horrible things they've done. It's not 100%, but we're there. But there's certainly people who did crappy stuff, 70s, 80s, 90s, that seem to maybe be on the news for a week and then go away, and that person never faced consequences. It's crazy how much of that I'm discovering. Like, how is this man still working? Anyway, we don't need to go off on that tangent. I'm not going to sit here and praise the guy because if
I can tell you what happened with guys like William Hurt and guys like Mel Gibson, and I can tell you exactly what it is. And it's that everything happened before social media. They didn't do anything. Well, in Gibson's case, he absolutely did. And it's why was gone for so long. And it's why he should not be making a comeback, but he still is. But in William Hurt's case, almost all of it was pre-social media, or it was getting put out there by people that nobody was paying attention to. And that's probably the bigger point. People just don't pay attention. But yeah, nothing else to say about William Hurt.
Yeah. As far as the character, I mean, I want to talk about a little bit about it. It's the center of the movie. I just like, and this applies for really all the elders. I don't know why we're dancing around the twist. We're not, I'm just not ready to talk about it. But essentially, these elders are, I don't know, they're almost, cosplaying is not the right word, but it reminds me of people that are like at Ren Fair, and, they make it a point to speak in the olden times way, whatever the heck it's called. And it feels a bit theatery, but not, you got to write this line where it can't be like cheesy acting. It's got to be believable, but obviously there's a reason for it. It's very earnest, I think is a word I would use for it. And some of his lines have just always stuck with me. Like, we mentioned Judy Greer confessing her love to Joaquin Phoenix. And before she does that, she asks her dad permission to marry this man. And he's like, well, shouldn't the boy be with you? And she's like, oh, well, I haven't told him yet. And he says, the young man is unaware of your intentions. Really funny. That, and towards the end of the movie, he says, it's only farce. And I don't know, that wording has always stuck with me. But yeah, that's the character of Edward Walker.
He is the conduit of which this entire movie happens. We will speak more about that later, but he is responsible for the entire situation we are in. And it's I have nothing else to say.
We mentioned Sigourney Weaver. She is another one of the elders. She is Alice Hunt. She is Joaquin Phoenix character's mother. And Sigourney Weaver, alum of the show. We've talked about her before. I believe she got a Mark Strong Award. I mean, it's just...
We've probably talked about Sigourney Weaver a lot, too, with the Alien month.
Yeah, I guess
as much as...
it was like 2 or 3, I guess. It's not Bryce Dallas Howard levels, but maybe she'll get there. I think Galaxy Quest has to be in our future, right? So we'll have to pick up another Sigourney Weaver there.
All right, do you really think we can get away with Galaxy Quest?
Didn't that movie bomb? I'm pretty sure that was a flop in theaters.
No, I don't think so.
Well, Andrew, you should want it to be so we can talk about it. Let's see. Galaxy.
I should look things up before I make statements, right? No, $45 million budget made $90 million.
All right. It's about break even level. Look, Andrew.
And it has a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes.
As someone once told me, it's our show and we can do whatever we want. So
you are correct.
But regardless, Sigourney Weaver, she's great. She's got an interesting it's corny. She got an interesting spot to play here. We learned a lot in the first half of this movie about the dynamics between all these characters. Who likes who, what their history is. And one of the things is that Edward Walker, who is a married man, has feelings for Sigourney Weaver's character. At least that's what her son tells her. And that comes into play. It's not just like it plays a very important role in the plot of the film because we'll talk more about this in scenes, I guess, but we see that a young person has died at the beginning of this movie. It's implied that maybe had they traveled to town to get medicine, they could have saved them, but they made an oath not to do that. Now, all of a sudden, we have another young person who could use medicine, but he makes the decision to send someone to town for many reasons, but one of them seems to be that he cares for her mother, and it's his feelings for her that are pushing him to essentially break the oath. A lot is set up in the first half of this movie that comes into play in the second half. Good storytelling. That's one of them. But yeah, interesting role. Regardless, like I said, Sigourney Weaver, she's a legend. It's weird that it's such a small supporting role, but you can't complain that you've got Sigourney Weaver playing a role in your movie.
Yeah. I mean, I agree completely. I looked up. I was like, Sigourney Weaver that much older than Joaquin Phoenix? And 25 years exactly. So
wow.
Good enough. Not exactly. Sorry, not like to the day, but like, it's just, and I mean, yeah, it's Sigourney Weaver. We talked about her before. She's a legend in her own right, and it is just again, it's just odd seeing her in such a small supporting role, but that's kind of more what she does now, and it is. Yeah, the dynamic of the elders is very interesting, and the dynamic they have between them, and kind of seeing that expanded upon all the way through the end of this movie is very interesting. And so she just fantastic talent that fits into that group perfectly, and she does a great job. And so yeah, the shades of the difference in situations as to why we didn't help this person, but we will help this person. There's a lot going on there, and I think that's definitely one of the more interesting parts of the movie when you really piece together everything that's going in to Edward's decision to send Ivy versus before. We'll talk about that more with scenes, but there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Brendan Gleeson plays August Nicholson. Man, I love Brendan Gleeson. I'm pretty sure we've talked about him on the podcast before.
He's so freaking good. Like,
so
my
good.
God, is he good. He is just awesome. And when I saw he was in this, I was like, fantastic. And the only problem is he's not in this movie more. He is.
He's doing such a good job. I mean, he is playing a broken man in this movie. I mean, the movie opens with, we know that his son has died, and it's his son's funeral. Very young son, as we learn. And understandably, he is very solemn after that, and reflecting a lot about past decisions and mistakes, and he has lots of dialogue about how sorrow will follow you. You can't run from it. And I love the way he plays his character, because it's so heavy, the stuff you're dealing with there. And then whenever it's revealed to him at the end that the decision was made to send somebody, in this case, when someone wasn't sent to save his son, I almost expected him to punch William Hurt's character for doing that.
Yeah.
But he plays it differently. He's like, look, if we can find hope, that's what we're all chasing. It's what we're all after. If this inspires hope, yeah, let's do it. And he says it with about as much enthusiasm as I'm repeating here, just much better because he's a good actor. But I just like that take on the character, for it to be in that position at the end of the movie, to handle it that way versus like a more base anger, which I think is the type of person that would make the agreement that everyone made in this movie. I think it makes much more sense for them to end up in that spot at the end of the movie. And it's just interesting decisions being made throughout from Brendan Gleeson, who's a masterful actor, great in everything that he does.
Yeah, so he's got this, and even the scene earlier in the movie where it's like Joaquin Phoenix is like bringing him firewood and just helping him in that aftermath. Joaquin Phoenix really basically is Superman in the first half of this movie. It's just helping everybody in this village all the time. He's assisting with everybody, but he's this quiet, kind of reserved man. He's talking to Brendan Gleeson and kind of having a conversation with him about, trying the things that he's going through in the aftermath of this. And this is kind of where Joaquin Phoenix is catching on that everybody's got secrets. All the elders have this black box that they all keep locked. And he's seeing that they all have them and kind of things like that. So these scenes are all very important. And Brendan Gleeson's part in all of it is very well done. And we'll be getting a reunion of sorts with Joaquin Phoenix and Brendan Gleeson this year in Joker 2, which maybe that'll make me go see it.
Do we know who Brendan Gleeson is playing, or just that he's in the movie?
We do not. We just simply know that he is in it.
I hope he's Batman.
he's just randomly Batman for no reason, despite the fact that he's older than Joaquin Phoenix. And also I'm sure I mentioned it the last time. I don't know what would we have talked about him in? Maybe Star Wars, because Domhnall Gleeson's his son. But
isn't he in Mission Impossible 2?
He is in Mission Impossible 2. There it is. But yeah, I'm sure I talked about it then. But just even to 2022, he did Banshees of Inisherin with reuniting with Colin Farrell and Martin McDonagh, and he's just so good in everything he does. Paddington 2, he's in the greatest movie of all time. So,
I've got to see these movies.
He's just fantastic, and I'm never going to be sad to see him in movies. Obviously, he was in the Harry Potter movies, a good chunk of the Harry Potter movies as well, playing Mad Eye Moody, and he's just great. He's Brendan Gleeson, man. I don't even want to abbreviate his name because it feels disrespectful. Like he's fantastic. He's fantastic here. The trauma that he's going through, and kind of you see that internal struggle of just like, he knows that in any other world he could have helped his son, but they're dedicated to this thing, and we're having to dance around these twists more and more, Chris, so we better hurry up.
All right, I think we've talked about enough of the main cast. Let's talk about the scenes of this film. We'll talk about the twist, but the first thing we're going to do is talk about our personal favorite scene in the movie. So Andrew, in your opinion, when is this film firing at all cylinders? What is the best scene of The Village? Excuse me.
I mentioned
M. Night Shyamalan's The Village.
It's MC Night Shyamalan's The Village, if you actually look at the poster. But
what did I say? Wait, what'd you say?
Joke. It's a joke because it has like a moon behind night, and it looks like a C, so it looks like it's MC Night Shyamalan. It's dumb, Chris. Cut this. But
so you just made a joke on the podcast that requires you to have intimate knowledge of the poster to get it. No, I'm leaving it in, Andrew.
Chris, that's how I roll. But I mentioned this scene earlier, and it's basically the kind of pseudo attack scene on the village. Basically, we have Joaquin Phoenix's character has gone into the woods against the advice of the elders, and has confessed. And then, I believe this is the right context for this.
I think he confesses after this. I think this is what makes him confess.
I think this is after he confesses, because it's a single thing. I don't know. Anyway, so these creatures have basically descended upon the village. There's multiples of them. And this is when we first get a look at them, too. Like, we've seen kind of hints and glimpses of, like, the red cloaks and stuff. A very good visual flair to kind of use for that when, like, they're up at the tower and they see one, like, pass by the bottom, and it's just this quick flash of red. Makes it really stand out and pop. And basically, we've sounded the alarm, and everybody is kind of running to safety. And everybody's trying to make sure that they're in their homes, in their cellars, so that they're not attacked by these things. And this is where we first get looks at it. And man, it's a cool look. It's very unique. It stands out. They've got these claws, but they've also got these like hedgehog type spine things that are sticking out through the cloaks and stuff. It's very, very cool looking. And throughout this scene, you're watching everybody kind of scramble and try to be safe. But Joaquin Phoenix is like running through, like he originally, like he helps a kid and gets the kid to his house. And then he like hides behind the house and the creature's right next to him. And it kind of builds to this moment where like Ivy knows that Lucius is still out there running around helping people. And she like stands on the porch with like her hand extended. And it's this kind of last minute thing where like she's standing there like waiting because she like knows he's going to come for her. This is right before their big confession, but like she knows he's going to come to help her because that's what he does. And she's standing with like her hand out, and then like in the background, out of focus, you see the creature, and the creature starts running towards her. And like at the last possible moment, because of course, Joaquin Phoenix like jumps across, grabs her hand, pulls her into the house, closes the door. They go into the cellar and close the thing down. And it's just really well put together and really well done. And it's that big moment where like the relationship between Ivy and Lucius is like cemented. Like it's been hinted at, it's been clued into, you kind of been given hints, and this is where it really is like undeniable. And that relationship is what fuels the rest of this movie, essentially. And just seeing a dude, even in the face of what are supposed to be these terrifying creatures, not being afraid. And he even says in a later scene, he's like, I don't focus so much on being afraid, I focus on like what I need to do. And in that moment, he was like, I need to make sure everybody's safe. And it's just pure heroic stuff. And that's always going to work for me. So yeah, that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, man, this is a great scene. It's so tense. I mean, even when you know all the reveals of this movie, this still plays out perfectly well because the fear and the characters, their reality is still the reality. And I love, that last shot where their hand sticking out. It's set up so well, like so many things in this movie, from previous scenes and dialogue, because she says a lot of their conversations before this are very one-sided. She talks a lot and he doesn't. And she says, essentially, I know that you like me because you used to hold my hand when I walked and then you stopped and now you don't touch me. And this scene is so... It just adds a lot of weight for him grabbing her hand. We get the slow motion shot of them running and their grasped hands like come towards the camera. Like that means so much that he's risking his life to save her, that he's holding her hand finally. And even once they're safe in the cellar, he's still got his hand in hers and is in his way confessing his love since she doesn't speak very much. And it's great. I mean, there's a lot happening in the scene, from the creatures to the love confession to everything else. I agree. It's very well done. And I agree about the design of these creatures. They are wild looking. Like the fact that they wear a cloak and they aren't just like a naked animal is just so interesting. And it makes you wonder, like, what is it a fairy tale creature? Or is it, you get enough of a look at them that you can appreciate the design, but it's so fleeting that you don't quite know what's going on there, which is really cool. That first shot, we've got the guy up in the watchtower and he opens up the floor to look down and there's this silence, and then boom, a creature just runs across underneath him. Like, terrifying. So scary. Yeah. So scary. It's a great pick, Andrew, and it really goes hand in hand, pun intended, with my favorite scene, which comes shortly after this, and you alluded to it, and it's with Ivy and Lucius on the porch. Yep. And I believe the order of scenes, I believe it's Lucius ventures into the woods, and then this attack happens. There's red marks on the doors. There's a town hall meeting. He confesses, and then we're on the porch. I believe that's the order that we have here. And he is sitting on Ivy's front porch. and she walks out, and they have this very hushed conversation. It is essentially all in one shot, which M. Night loves to do. And they sit next to each other, they face each other, and you just have each of their profiles just completely filling the frame. And it is such good dialogue. And there's, like, up until this point, we've kind of just been learning, oh, this character kind of likes this character, all this setup. And this is like really putting a bow on their relationship that has been set up throughout this movie. And one of the first things she says to him is, when we are married, will you dance with me? Like, she knows she has to, like, coax this guy out. Like, I know how you feel. You know how I feel. Let's just talk about it. And there's even dialogue alluding to that, where she's like, why don't you speak what's on your mind? And he's like, why can't you stop speaking what's on your mind? And he confesses his love by, like, what good would it be? What good would it be if I told you that you're in every waking thought of mine, that I constantly think about you? What good would come of that? And she has talked about how brave he is, and he admits, I mean, I love this line. I had to write it down verbatim. He says, the only time I feel fear as others do is when I think of you in harm. I mean, come on, that's like an all-time, that's you had me at hello level writing of a character confessing to love. It's so good. I love this scene so much. It ends with them finally kissing as the camera pans away. It's just, I mean, one reason it's my favorite scene, not just by its own merits, but because when people talk about this movie, they just talk about the twist. That is the only thing anyone wants to talk about, even from the time it came out. I mean, that excerpt I read from Roger Ebert's review, he's basing his entire opinion on the movie on the twist ending, and that's all you heard about this movie. Even if you're listening to this podcast and you have not seen the movie, we haven't said the twist, but you probably know it. Everyone knows it. And it's just, it lives or dies by this twist. And I think, I personally don't like that. Because even if, whatever you think of the movie, I think this scene is so well done. We just have a scene with two characters who love each other, are finally connecting, and it's so well done. And you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater if you're throwing this whole movie away because you have a problem with the twist ending. And it just really digs into, like, the core concept of our podcast, that we want to celebrate things that work, even if it's in a movie that otherwise does not work. I think In a Bottle, this porch scene is just, man, it's really well done. M. Night Shyamalan is a very good director, especially his camera work. There is almost not a traditional shot reverse shot conversation in this movie. His camera is always moving in interesting ways, always revealing things at the edge as it pans over that relates to the dialogue that's happening. And this confession being shot in a oneer, I think, is very effective. I mean, look, I like this movie very much, but I wanted to pick like a really powerful, quiet scene in this movie that has nothing to do with the twist, nothing to do with the creatures, because I think it's just a film made by a very competent, if not great, director, at least at the, at the time of making this movie. So yeah, favorite scene, porch love confession.
It's a great pick. This is a great scene. It was definitely in the running for me, just because it's these two kind of contrasting characters. He even points it out. It's like one keeps his thoughts to himself. The other one says everything that's on her mind. And yet they've combined and they have this deep love for each other. And one of the characters even later, when they're interviewing the village about this kind of attack and they're talking to everybody, that one of the character even says, like, love unites the strangest people. And this scene is just really great because you've got Joaquin Phoenix kind of really showing emotion and speaking more for the first time. And you have that kind of reconciliation of ideas here and just that embracing of what is kind of been unspoken for so long. And it is truly a fantastic scene. So I think this is a fantastic pick. So full endorsement from me.
Andrew, there's a lot of scenes I want to talk about. There's a lot of like in this movie, but man, let's just talk about the twist of this movie so we can quit dancing around it. As we said, there's two twists of the film. Late in the movie, it's revealed that there are no creatures in the woods. It is a story made up by the elders so that the younger generation is too scared to venture into the woods. The elders say it's because they all used to live in town and bad things happen and evil stuff happened and they're safer in their small village, which is true. But there's another reveal late in this movie that this film does not take place in the 1890s. It takes place in modern times, presumably about 2004 when the movie was made. I'm not sure if we see an actual year, but at the end of Ivy's journey, she climbs a wall and a person in a vehicle pulls up, which is very jarring to see in a movie that you think is a period piece. And the revelation is that the elders living in modern times all faced some sort of tragedy in their life and they're grief stricken and they met in a grief counseling. And our main guy, Mr. Walker, who owns a large wildlife preserve, proposes that they all move into this reserve off the grid, truly off the grid, and live life in a simpler way to avoid the evils of the modern world. It's a lot to take in a short amount of time. I mean, we knew about half of that. We knew these people were running from something, but the fact that it's in modern times, the extreme lengths they've gone to run away from it is what the big revelation is. And I know this is a divisive thing. It's what people point to often if they hate the movie or, some people might say it's a twist for twist's sake. It doesn't add anything. Or Roger Ebert in an interview said he related it to it was all a dream as far as like empty twist. And hashtag Positivity Podcast here, I'm going to disagree with all of that. I think it makes their decision more extreme, but more powerful, the lengths they're willing to go. I think that it is not at all equivalent to It Was All a Dream, because that means that none of the things you previously experienced or saw actually happened, and all of the stuff actually happens. Like, it's all the terror in creatures and fear is all real for these characters. And you rewatch this movie knowing the twist, and I'm going to get to the core of what I think makes a good twist ending work, is that it's all seeded throughout the film. There's a line early on in the movie. It opens with this funeral, and then they're all having a big communal dinner. And Edward Walker stands up to give a speech, and he says, it's times like this that may make you question ourselves. It may make you ask, did we make the right decision to settle here? He's saying right there up front, like, the sacrifice we made, the decision we made, like, this is a big test to that. And of course, you don't have all the context in their first viewing, but on second viewing, like, they are openly talking about this thing throughout. So I don't think I disagree with twist for twist's sake. I think it's all seeded for it. Look, obviously, it all works for me. I've got more to say about it, but Andrew, come on. What do you think about these double twists at the end of the film?
Well, I kind of mentioned this beforehand in hashtag Positivity Podcast, but I think this is definitely the moment that we start getting the M. Night Shyamalan just twists for twist's sake. He just does twists on top of twists. I think that all starts here. Now, I mostly agree with you that I don't think it's necessarily warranted on this film. I think these twists work. The first twist especially just works. There's nothing wrong with it, I think. I don't think that's the twist people have issues with. I think it's specifically the second one. When Ed Walker basically reveals Ed, can I call you Ed? I'm going to, because you're dead. But when Ed is basically like, none of it's real or it's a farce, that's it's kind of almost expected at that point that they don't want them going into the woods. But it does create this notion that, okay, there's nothing in the woods, but the elders don't want you going in there regardless, which means there's still something there that you're not supposed to see. And it's more than just leaving the commune or whatever. And like you said, you've built this idea, and I think it works really well, especially when you frame it. And I'm going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to talk about this as to why he sends Ivy. because there's a moment where they're like, why would you send Ivy on a quest to get medicine? Because I guess we didn't talk about this part yet, so I guess I should frame this first. I'm getting beyond the twists here, but I guess the whole movie builds toward the twist.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
So anyway, you mentioned your favorite scene was when obviously Ivy and Lucius kind of finally connect, and they tell it to the village. They tell everybody. And so Adrian Brody's character, Noah Percy, who has some kind of relationship with Ivy, it's presented more as a sibling relationship simply because Noah is disabled in some way. But when Noah finds out that Ivy and Lucius are together, their intentions, I guess, have been made clear. That's how they frame it. They've made their intentions clear to the village. Noah goes and stabs Lucius several times. And out of jealousy, out of anger, out of possessiveness, whatever it is, Noah treats objects like women. I don't know, but it's sorry, that's from Big Lebowski, which you haven't seen. To
be fair, I have seen the Big Lebowski, I think once, so not enough to catch all of your references, but
yeah, anyway,
I'm glad I didn't correct you. I would have looked like an idiot.
You would have. Anyway, so this is what puts Joaquin Phoenix on the shelf for essentially the second half of this movie. And puts Noah kind of in isolation as he's kind of dealing with sort of trying to understand what he's done. And this is what sets Ivy off onto her mission. But this is what the key difference is, because you can tell there's definitely amongst the elders a sense of, well, his son was dying and we didn't do this, but now he's dying and you will do this. And he says, because Lucius is the victim of a crime. And it's fundamentally different from just existing and something bad happening. Basically, this is Ed essentially saying Lucius cannot suffer the fate that we all suffered. Like, to let him die of a crime means that we have now let this world become the one we left. And that is fundamentally important for why he sends Ivy on this mission versus not doing it before. And he's like, there's sadness, there's trauma, there's everything, but this is the crime. This is a crime that has been committed against him, and that is why we need to actually do something different. And then there's a base, and then they actually ask, like, well, then why send Ivy? Because she's blind. And he says, because she's tougher than most people I know, which is a lie. He's sending Ivy because she won't see what's happening.
I mean, I don't know if she is tough. I don't want to say it's about lie, but yeah, there is
tough. It is
understanding
though,
that she
won't
won't
at a certain
have,
point, she gets to the road and he says, your guides are going to stay behind and you have to take that trek alone.
Yeah.
Now, he may be doing this because he knows Ivy's up to the task, but you cannot ignore that the big part of it is she will not see what is on the other side of that wall. She will hear it. She will have some experience in it, but she will not actually see what it is, which means that she's willing to return, and there's not going to be as much of an issue as if somebody else saw it. So everything plays into everything else with the twists, and I think that's exactly what you're talking about, where that's what makes the twist work, is every single piece of it factors together. And I think in this movie especially, they do factor into each other. They all build on top of one another, and it all makes sense. So the first twist is kind of the one I expect. It's sort of maybe the one the audience has kind of built up at that point. The elders are behind keeping everybody in the village. I think it's definitely the second twist, I think, that loses people. And it's an extreme jump. Like, don't misunderstand me. I'm not going to say that, like, these people are like, oh, we've all had someone we love get killed. Let's start a commune where we live like it's the 1890s. Like, it's a pretty deep stretch to get from one to the other. So I guess I sort of understand why there's people who would be like, what? Especially in the sense that, like, whatever his, like, you know, when you think about it in the straight sense of, like, whatever his son died of, modern medicine almost assuredly could have saved him. So, and I'm not necessarily saying that like I agree with it. I'm just simply saying that like I can see why somebody would see this twist, even within the context of the film, and see it as too extreme a jump.
Sure.
And I think I don't think that's an unreasonable take. And I agree with you for the most part that I think it works. I think it all, like I said, I think all the twists build on top of one another. And it all fits together. The movie seeds them perfectly. And I think it works. But I can see why somebody would get to that final twist and be like, all right, you've lost me. I think I'm just willing to understand and see that, like, yeah, I can see how you'd be like, all right, okay, I'm ejecting at this point, but I do think the movie builds it all really well. I think it does work, especially all the decision making that's going into it, why the situations are different, all the plot points. I think it all works together well, and I think it's all set up by ultimately everything that is revealed. Like when you have all the information on the table, the decision making that has gone into what has happened, to me, makes perfect sense.
I have to agree that, yeah, like it is a jump for these group of people to make such an extreme decision, in the sense that I can't imagine this happening in real life. But look, you shouldn't judge movies by whether or not it could happen in real life, to a degree. But I think there's something anyone can relate to with being grief-stricken, and as he says, like, to the point where, like, you're considering suicide, to want to run away from the evils of the world, the modern world. And like, I get the gut feeling. Obviously, these people act on it to an extreme degree, but like, if you've been in that situation or can imagine the situation that these people have been in, I've got friends that are talking about, I'd love to just go live on a commune. Maybe not pretend it's 1800s or what have you, but I think a lot of people fantasize about going off the grid and living a simpler life. So in some ways, I think it's not such a huge leap, but I think most importantly, there's just reasoning behind it, rather than being like Twilight. I almost backhanded Twilight Zone, but almost Twilight Zone Revelation. Like, oh, it's modern times.
Watch it there,
I know, I love Twilight Zone, so I don't. Maybe that's not a good comparison, but yeah, I just think that it earns everything that it reveals. And I will tell you, watching this movie in theaters for the first time, I guessed this twist, that it was modern times. Probably in part because I just expected a twist from M. Night Shyamalan, as we've discussed. But I'll tell you what.
Go ahead.
I'll tell you exactly where I clued into it, and is honestly, I think it might be like the ignorance of a young Chris Logan that clued me into it, because it is at Judy Greer's character's wedding, and one of the elders is talking to Ivy, and she says that she used to have a younger sister, and Ivy's asking about her. And then the elder says, "My sister did not live past her 23rd birthday. A group of men took her life in an alley by her home." Hearing alley, that just sounded so modern to me. And I don't know, 1890s, I guess technically there was alleys, but something about her phrasing it that way, the image put in my mind was like a modern alley. And I was like, wait a minute. From then I was like, I think that's where this is going. And I turned out to be right about it.
That is a good eye, but that story definitely did raise a flag for me. Just again, because we're like, a story like that just has to sound extreme to these characters, because they're like, well, where are these men? Have we been in this? And I guess there is this kind of, they talk about the towns.
Yeah.
They've mentioned the towns, and the towns were this. And so they rationalize basically any bad thing. They just say took place while they were living in the town. And now they live in this village free from the towns. And, but anytime a character describes like an extreme story, because Sigourney Weaver has a moment too, where she talks about her husband getting like robbed and stripped naked and dumped in a river. And her son, Joaquin Phoenix, is like, why are you telling me this? Like, in the 1800s version of that. And you can tell that they use these stories as a way to be like, okay, don't ever question us, basically. Like, you find out that there's just a lot of mechanisms in place to never question the way of life here. And obviously, people still question things, and especially when you get certain clues. But yeah, definitely, there's definitely moments with some of the elders telling stories to the younger people that I think definitely raised some flags. But the use of Allie, that's a really good clue in there, because it just feels so modern. Like, you would never refer to the space between two houses as an alley in the 1890s in that type of like environment. Like, maybe you could do that in like you think of like Jack the Ripper-esque London. Like, you say alley there, I mean, maybe not as ridiculous, but that's like a city with lots of stuff. I don't know, but that's a good catch. It's a very good catch.
And thank you. I've watched this movie a lot. I've always really liked it. And I have, especially in like younger, more film snobby critical, like I have tried to push back against it and watch the movie wrong, as we say. And things like, maybe you hear some growling from the creatures that doesn't quite maybe we're cheating a little bit there, especially when it's Adrian Brody's character in the costume. I don't know. So I tried to like poke holes in it. And one thing I always wrestled with was that the characters are speaking in this old-fashioned way, because it looks like maybe about the 70s that they decided to do this. And like, it seems extreme to retrain how you speak, and for what purpose? Like, why does it matter that you speak this way? But it's probably because you've got to watch your phrases and watch your words, because you could raise questions and have to explain things that you can't explain under this concept. So I think that's why they simplified their verbiage to colonial times, so that they wouldn't have, eventually have kids that ask questions and have to explain things that they can't explain, like using the word alley, which clued me in as a youngster. So that really just clicked in my head, because like I've always kind of struggled with that. And like, I guess there's actually a reason that they changed the way that they speak, to help sell this lie. Another thing that I sort of took away from this movie for the first time is just the concept of parents lying to their kids to protect them is universal. Parents lie to their kids. Straight up. For a lot of reasons. I mean, Santa Claus is a simple example, but sometimes it's easier just... Okay, like, Andrew, did you ever hear that it's illegal to drive with your dome light on in the car? Did your parents ever tell you that?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever heard it was illegal. I got told I shouldn't do it.
Well, my parents says we'll get pulled over. It's illegal to drive with that light on. It's just annoying for the driver to have the light on. Like, it's easier just to lie sometimes, or to be more black and white to your kids. And so like, this is an extreme version of it, but this is parents lying to their kids to protect them from the world. It's something that all parents do.
Because I said so sometimes just doesn't cut it. So they come up with increasingly more insane scenarios. Not insane, but just, I mean, you hear your fair share of stuff. And my parents, I guess, were just a lot more direct in being like, don't do that, it's dumb. They didn't really they just looked at me and were like, Andrew, we know you're not the smartest, but come on, put it together. But that's a big part of this here, this is all the dedication to the concept. I think is one of the most interesting parts of this movie, because like I said, like I mentioned, like, while Brendan Gleeson's son is dying of seemingly some illness, like, every single one of the elders knows that in the outside world he could be saved. Every single one. The one that have the development, the Noah's parents know that in the real world he would get so much more help and support. But that fear they have. And here's the thing about it. The movie doesn't really address this. But you could easily portray these characters as having done the wrong thing by creating this comic.
Oh, yeah.
Like they all ran from their trauma to a place where they're like, well, if we control it and we have everything we need here, then nothing bad can ever happen. And then bad things still happen. So there's obviously still there's a statement on a society here, which I guess Joaquin Phoenix likes doing movies about living in a society. But
and it's one thing for you to make that decision, but they are taking the decision away from their kids.
They've taken it away and have chosen to go with, like you said, we're talking. It almost feels tame to call it a lie at this point. It's almost, actually, I'll say it. It's a delusion essentially that these elders have, that doing this makes life better, because they are faced with several pieces of evidence throughout this movie that it's not better when your children are dying of easily preventable illnesses, when your mentally challenged children are stabbing other people because they don't have the proper understanding of things and they're not getting the help that they need. They can see that day to day, that the decision they have made has hurt people within this group. But it really becomes that kind of, but it's for the greater good.
It's like a pros cons list with them. Like, oh yeah, there's some cons, but it's outweighed by the pros of being shielded from
by the fact
society.
That all the rest of us are fine. All the rest of us are doing just fine. You know, the like you said, the pros outweigh the cons. And
some of my favorite parts of the movie are the elders questioning that decision. Like I mentioned very early on, he gives that speech that we do the right thing to settle here. And there's one line that I didn't fully contextualize until I was watching it here. It's right before he reveals the truth to Ivy. She's sitting in a chair, and he says, "The moment I heard my daughter's vision had finally failed her, I was sitting in that very chair. I was so ashamed." And then it cuts to the next scene immediately. And it's like, man, that seems really harsh, because you're like, he's ashamed that he has a blind daughter? Like, no, he's ashamed. He felt shame because his daughter lost her vision because of the decisions that he made, because in the modern world, there's a chance that she wouldn't have. That's the shame that he felt when he learned that she couldn't see. It was reckoning with the decision that they made. And that's just so
like,
interesting.
In the real world, I could have possibly gotten her the help that she didn't lose her vision.
Yeah.
Because she still sort of sees. It's an odd little thing. She talks about
the
like
color
seeing people's
thing,
color. Yeah. And so it's very possible that she's not like fully blind, and that, you know, get some glasses. Like it's that kind of thing where like there's possibly an operation or some glasses or something that could allow her to see, and they didn't do it. And it's an interesting dichotomy that the movie admittedly doesn't dive into it too much, but the struggle of the elders becomes more and more apparent throughout the film.
Yeah.
But at the end of the film, it is the film. I'm calling it a film now. Peak Kino here. But literally even in the aftermath, where Noah's jealousy strikes him again. So we haven't really talked about Ivy's journey itself yet. Mostly because it feels like she kind of walks through the same 20 feet of the forest 8 times. But that's not a shot at her being blind. That's a shot at kind of how it's filmed. Like it just feels like she's kind of in the same area for a lot of it. But she sees one of the creatures and gets attacked by one of the creatures. And so it's that weird moment with you, the audience, are kind of like, wait a minute.
It replays her dad's words. Like, well, there was rumors historically of creatures in these woods. Right. So it's like, well,
is this actually one? And then we flash back and we find out that Noah has broken out of the room that he's in, but not before he found like their monster suit hidden under their floorboards. And so he runs into the woods after Ivy. Still kind of, at this point, he's upset because Ivy's only interaction with him after he stabbed Lucius was her smacking him and hitting him. And so now there's anger mixed in with the jealousy, mixed in with him just not understanding. So he puts on the costume with whatever intentions. I can't assume they're very noble, probably more deeply malicious. And she gets the better half of him. She gets the upper hand against him. And but this leads to Noah dying. Basically, he falls into this hole, and seemingly mortally injures himself. And so the elders at the end of the movie are literally like, they say it because like Ivy faced a creature. So Ivy doesn't even know that the creature was Noah, which is another whole piece of that. And then basically, they say, well, we can use Noah's death. We can say Noah was killed by the creatures. And that, you just clued into it, that was the clever little out so that Ivy still stays afraid, because he said, and it all worked out to his favor, because he said there were stories and rumors of creatures in the woods when I was a teacher back in the towns. And because she got attacked by something in the woods and doesn't know it was Noah, she's going to stay afraid and actually believe that the creatures are real now, because she doesn't know. She has no idea. So the end of the movie, it reminds me a little bit of Watchmen, honestly. Just, when kind of Ozymandias asks, basically has that question of like, is this going to work? Is my plan going to work? And the end of this movie with the elders feels very similar, where they're kind of like, are we still all committed to this?
Yeah, Night Owl would not be on board with what they're doing here. They're saying you haven't preserved innocence, you've perverted it.
Where's Patrick Wilson when you need him? He would have fit in this movie. He would have
fit in so well, right?
But,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he could definitely do this. But yeah, the way that all fits together at the end, I do like that, because that ending is definitely probably your biggest moment of kind of looking at the elders and being like, that's the closest they come to like,
maybe giving.
Are we the baddies?
Yeah.
Are we the baddies? And they still, faced with everything, the death of Noah, Lucian getting stabbed, like they're watching these kind of things they ran from start to manifest themselves in this world that they've created for themselves, but they are still dedicated and think they can make it work. And it is certainly a choice at the end of the day, but it is. I would have loved to see a movie about like the next day. Like, how are we going to do that?
It does have an
how are we coming back from this?
An abrupt ending, like you're expecting, even though the movie is it's less than 2 hours, like hour 50, I think. It still feels like a sudden ending when she gets back and like, boom, it's over. It's like, oh, we don't get to see him like heal, get better, the fallout. Like it does end so abruptly despite all that. And another ripple that I didn't pick up until now, Noah's being kept in the quiet room, as they call it, after he has stabbed Lucius, and they go open the door, and there's the reveal that he found the suit beneath the boards. And a piece of dialogue I never noticed before is the mom says, "The animals." I think the implication is that he found that suit a long time ago, and he's known the truth, and he's been in part terrorizing the town for fun, because throughout the movie we have these skinned animals showing up, and I never liked the explanation that Edward gives, because Ivy asked about him, and he goes, "I believe it was one of the elders, but it shouldn't happen anymore."
Right.
It seems like such a throwaway. I'm like, we don't know who does it. I think it was Noah, and I never noticed that till now. So I think he has known all along, but not all along, but for some time, and he, like I said, was just playing a game, tormenting him, doing this to the animals, and at the end in the woods, like, he doesn't speak or say anything because he's playing along. He knows Ivy believes it, and he's not trying to kill her. He's essentially kind of just playing tag. Like, he's just playing.
But like, even during the attack where all the creatures are on the town, he never seems afraid. He never seems
he's laughing
concerned.
at the door. He's
laughing at the door. He's laughing about it. And that's very interesting. I didn't catch that line of dialogue, but and then you frame that with William Hurt basically saying, "Oh, we don't know who's doing it. We assume it's one of the elders."
Yeah.
Basically, like Walker's only real explanation is like, well, it has to be one of us, because who else would it be? Like, because it can't be, because he knows it can't be anything else. So he assumes it has to be one of them just trying to do that. But he doesn't even consider for a second that it was Noah doing it. And
There's this scene
that's very good. Another excellent catch. Chris, you would be very good at reading a mystery novel.
I'll have to try it sometime. There's this scene that feels manipulative, excuse me, at first, where it's Sigourney Weaver and William Hurt, and they're at night behind the building talking in hushed tones, and she's like, the animals. She's like, there was marks on the wall too high for a coyote. Like, she's scared. She's genuinely scared by the animals, but she's an elder. She shouldn't be scared by the animals. So I think maybe she's just like, well, we can't keep saying it's coyotes because it's obviously not. But no, she genuinely doesn't know who's doing this to the animals because it's Noah doing it in secret. And that's a scene that I never quite read completely until this most recent viewing. So, man, I don't know. It's a really good script in my opinion. It's so tight. Everything's accounted for. Everything is set up so well. I love this movie. In case it hasn't been made clear, there's a few odds and ends we could pick up here, but one last main thing I really want to highlight here is the score of this movie is awesome. It's very good. James Newton Howard. But specifically, there is this strong violin theme throughout, especially when Ivy is on screen. And from watching special features of this back in the day, there's a lot of talk about the score of this movie. And there is a female violinist playing the violin. And she's just a solo violinist. And Shyamalan talked about how he felt there were strong parallels to like the lead of the score being a woman and Ivy being the lead, that it just thematically fits so well. And he clearly felt very strongly about that, because when the credits hit, the very first credit before any of the actors is featured violinist Hilary Hahn. Like, he is giving this musician like top billing. So cool. I really love that little aspect of it because it is a great score. I love kind of hearing some of the behind the scenes about it. The fact that it's a woman, the fact that he highlights it, it's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I agree completely. The music was a big part of this. Very sparse at times, and it works very much for this movie. That's about kind of especially as you get into that second half, because it's just Ivy on this mission, and it is just very, very effective. And it works extremely, extremely well. Kind of reminds me a lot of, there's a movie called Spotlight. Don't know if you've seen it.
I have not.
It's very, very good. It's about the Boston Globe investigation into the Catholic Church. Such subject matter is difficult for you to process. I would suggest not watching it. But very, very well done. Stars Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Liv Schreiber, all the greatest actors of all time, basically. Rachel McAdams, all of them. But that score is basically just piano, a single piano, pretty much the whole time. And it works extremely well for the mood and the atmosphere that's being set throughout that film. And just, again, very simple, so it's not this full orchestral, not that it really would call for such a thing, but just very, very sparse. And it works extremely well for the story being told. And so soundtrack, it's one thing that I can like criticize about, like, you think about like iconic themes, like in superhero movies, even like the Christopher Reeve Superman theme is one of the most iconic superhero themes of all time. Danny Elfman's Batman. Those iconic themes, especially the MCU, gets a lot of flack for things like that, where like the music ends up being very like placeholder, and there's not a lot of iconic moments. And generally, I agree. I think there are some standouts. Like the Avengers theme caught on over time. I really like the Captain America theme, but like, what's Thor's theme? Doesn't have one. Like there's stuff that just doesn't. Like what's Iron Man doesn't have some big theme that we associate with him. That doesn't happen. And I mean, there is a song we associate with Iron Man, but not for the right reasons. So when you have a movie that's got a score that's so integral to it, And like this, it is fantastic to see that person credited essentially first, because that carries a lot of this movie, especially as we get into those kind of sparser wilderness scenes in the latter half. And again, just thinking about how Ivy is the one that goes on the journey, specifically because he knows she's tough, but she knows she won't see anything, and it also plays into why they so vehemently told Lucius not to go, because Lucius would have seen what was on the other side of that, and with him questioning everything already, does he come back? Does he expose the whole thing? What does he do with that? And now, even with Lucius having been injured, he's probably going to question things a little bit less, because he's going to be like, this is all what happens when things get unstable because I went into the woods. And it's just, man, this movie's got layers, man. It's a real ogre of a movie.
One movie down in M. Night month, 4 to go. Got a 5-week month here. I'm excited for this one, and I've seen most of the movies we're going to cover this month. The ones I have seen, I do not love. Like, I love The Village. It'll be interesting to revisit some of these and find some positives, because they don't have the best reputation in my mind. I'm excited to do that, and there's a few other holes in my filmography for M. Night. Some of his newer ones I actually haven't watched yet. So by the end of this month, I'm going to try to have seen all of them. Maybe we can do a little ranking at the end of this month of where we fall with M. Night movies. But I'm glad, Andrew, that you've seen The Village, and I'm glad that you're coming out with a thumbs up, it sounds like, because I've championed this movie for a long time, and it's nice to recruit somebody to the cause.
This movie gets one of these. I'm giving the camera a thumbs up, folks.
Fantastic. Next week, we're talking about Lady in the Water, a movie I've seen exactly one time in theaters. Honestly, didn't think I'd ever see it again, but here we are. We will be diving in, pun intended.
Here we are.
Next week. But for now, it's time for our question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do exactly that. Just hop into our Discord. There's a link right there in your show notes, right there on your podcast app or whatever you're using to listen to us. There's a link to our Discord server. Click it. We'll wait. We'll be there. You can talk about all kinds of nerdy stuff.
We're waiting right now.
Hang out with the community.
We're waiting right now, folks. We're going to be here until you do it. So I need you to make this decision quickly.
Andrew, no one's joining right now. What do we do?
Sorry, Chris. I guess we're stuck.
While we're waiting, we're going to answer this question left by Mike Lynch. Here's what he says. Is there a filmmaker whose filmography is not your favorite, but you love their aesthetic? And Andrew, Mike gives an example that is a very good answer, and probably my ultimate answer for this. I don't want to color your mind, though. If does anyone spring into mind for you? A filmmaker, you don't love their movies, but you love something about them. You love their aesthetic. You maybe respect what they're doing. Who does that make you think of?
The two names that immediately come to mind are Zack Snyder and Michael Bay.
Interesting. Okay.
Is that not what they said?
That's not what they said, but I think those are good answers. Expand on that. So
with Zack Snyder, at least until his Netflix movies, because I think on his Netflix movies he's using a different cinematographer, and it shows. I don't think he's using Larry Fong anymore. But something people would point out watching a lot of Zack Snyder's films is that he was great at crafting this iconic imagery. Using comic panels to tell stories, and using iconic images within his films. And the issue I generally had is I'm like, yeah, this all looks really, really cool, but like the script is letting it down. Like it's this iconic imagery that's just not being backed up by a great story. #PP.
Right.
So I've always thought that those movies looked fantastic, even though they're a little dark for my taste. But they were just not backed up by a great story. And I always kind of said, I'm like, Zack Snyder, when he has a good script, like, look at Dawn of the Dead. Like, it's a great script.
Yeah.
And this is arguably his best movie. And Michael Bay is very similar, where like I kind of like that 90s big budget action aesthetic, but so many of his movies are just paper thin. And then people will point out something like Pain and Gain, which people will say is his best movie. I actually did really like Ambulance or LA Ants, depending on which poster you're looking at. But that obviously had the greatest actor of all time at the center of it, Jake Gyllenhaal. But like I've always kind of liked the aesthetic that they can put together. Like Michael Bay is great at crafting this epic scope. Like his movies feel massive. This wasn't always a whole lot of script story to it. And I think Zack Snyder is not exactly the same in the sense of what imagery he's creating, but I think both of them have these fantastic visual senses that just get let down by the stories and the scripts. And I think when those guys have great scripts in front of them, it results in something pretty good. Just generally speaking, it feels like they don't. Hashtag PP.
Yeah, great examples. I gotta agree with both of those. There's some visual flair I like about the filmmakers more than anything else in their movies. And, you know, they're guys that come from like commercial or music video backgrounds that carry over that aesthetic, but maybe from a storytelling perspective never click with me or some people, but they still have that aesthetic. So yeah, great. I mean, I've got nothing to add. I think you nailed it on both of those directors. I would also throw maybe Michel Gondry into this category, because I think Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is just the perfect marriage of script and director. Like Charlie Kaufman's script, Michel Gondry's visuals, match made in heaven. Love that movie. And I don't think he has, from the ones I've seen, found another script that matches his style since then. I saw The Science of Sleep. Lots of cool visuals. Didn't click at all for me overall, story-wise. I almost said Green Lantern. Green Hornet, we talked about.
Say, you're gonna disrespect our boy Green Hornet like that?
I like Green Hornet. Look, I've got a whole 2-hour conversation talking about things I liked about it, but it doesn't click. That script and director style there's not the same marriage as Eternal Sunshine. Be Kind, Rewind, and never finish it, but maybe I should go back to that one. I know, Andrew, I think you said you were a fan, so
I think that's as strange as that may sound, I feel like that's maybe one of the scripts that gets the closest, where you can kind of tell that like he's a little bit there's something there that he really likes. I don't know. It's definitely not to the level of like Eternal Sunshine, but I think there's I think it's really, really fun. I think it's probably my second favorite movie of his. So,
well, let me tell you the example Mike Lynch said. He says, for me, Rob Zombie is a great artist who seems to know exactly who he is and how he wants you to perceive him. His movies are, well, hashtag PP. Man, I want to like every single Rob Zombie movie that I watch. And I honestly, hashtag PP, rarely do. But I love throwback grindhouse cinema, that dirty, grimy thing that he goes for. I think visually, like on paper, I should love all of his movies, but I mean, like, I don't need to get into all the reasons why I don't like them. Mainly it's because I find all of his characters unlikable, but I do like his visual. Like, he seems totally in control. I think we're getting the exact movie he wants to make. They're just not for me, but they look cool.
I agree with that completely. I want to like the things that Rob Zombie does more than I actually do, which of course is very little. But it's I think it's great. But like, again, like if he's got a great script, which I don't know that he's had, because I think he writes a lot of his own movies. I would love to see that aesthetic in action. Like, you know, you watch something like the original Texas Chainsaw, and that's definitely, I think, like the birth or like the prototype of what Rob Zombie's style is kind of pulling from. It's a lot of that West Texas grit, grime, a whole lot of concerns about tetanus, like just a real big, like just a real vibe that he's going for. And I think that's a very useful aesthetic if you're telling the right story. But obviously, when something like Texas Chainsaw has kind of set the bar, you're kind of working in the shadows of that. So I would be very interested in seeing, just in general, what Rob Zombie would do with like a really good script. That sounds super negative, but like he writes a lot of what he does. I don't know that writing is a narrative like those are his strong suit. And I would be very interested in how he would direct something written by somebody else. I'm sure he's had collaborative writers, but just like a really solid script. I'm curious how that looks on the other side.
I agree. Thanks for the question, Mike Lynch. And if anybody out there, is there a filmmaker that maybe you want to like, or you like their visual flair, but don't connect with their movies? Let us know. Hop into that Discord like I talked about earlier. Share your thoughts. You can also find us on social media. We would love to hear from you. And until next time, until next week, until Lady in the Water, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Give him a follow on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for his SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for the best of the rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Didn't make quite as big of a splash, but is sort of like the cult favorite of his filmography at this point. That movie has only garnered more critical attention. Do you see what's happening on my screen? Did you see that?
You like dimmed out? What?
There was fireworks behind me. What the hell? I didn't touch anything. That was weird. So weird. Is it because I said New Year? Happy New Year? I said that a long time ago. Why?
Happy New Year. Do I get them? No?
That was so weird.
Discord. Fireworks. Do the thing.
That was bizarre.
That was...
Man.
The rhythm's all gone.
I know. That, of course, starts with The Sixth Sense, a movie that was very popular and had a very well-known twist ending. I think it's probably the first movie that comes to most people's minds when they think of twist ending. Fireworks just happened again. Do you see that? Now there's a thumbs up on my screen. Did you see that?
I did. I saw the thumbs up.
Is it because I gave a thumbs up?
It's got to be.
Dude, what are you doing, Discord?
Discord's losing its mind.
That was insane.
Holy hell.
All right.